Okay, good afternoon, everybody. This is Vivek Joshi, founder and CEO of Entitle, and a host of our Aftermarket Champions Podcast. I'm excited to welcome our latest guest today, Bridgett Rousselle from Xylem. Bridgett is the Global Lifecycle Business Automation Leader. Bridgett, I think I butchered that, but I think that's approximately right, for the services business. Bridgett joins us from Montreal, Canada, but she has a global role and she's a globetrotter. And I think shortly after she finishes this podcast in the next few days, she's off on a long jaunt through Asia. So, with that, Bridgett, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today, and love to hear a little bit about your story now. Help us understand a little bit about Xylem, a little bit about the role you're playing today, and how you got here.
Bonjour. Hello, Vivek. Thank you for the opportunity. This is great. Yes, I'm excited about this discussion in around aftermarket and service. As you mentioned, I'm actually located in Montreal, Canada. I'm currently with Xylem Global. Xylem is a water company. We solve water, like our slogan says. So we do manufacture, distribute, and service our customer, whatever, in different business segments or market, if you want to say, municipal application, industrial, commercial, and even residential, to the transport of water to treating it and making sure that we have drinkable water in the world, but also making sure that we treat it so we maintain it right across our globe, right? A little bit of background. I guess I've been with Xylem for maybe now 9 years. I had the opportunity within Xylem specifically to own different roles. And I know we're probably going to talk about that a little bit more, but I had the opportunity to touch a lot of different functions within the company, which is what's great. I'm very curious as nature. So it helped me, broaden my experience and skill set even within Xylem. So I've been working with the operation, customer service, sales, aftermarket, the life cycle, and different strategic project, throughout North America and globally, which that's kind of big. But even before Xylem, I guess my background, ironically, I studied psychology. But I think that's why I'm here today, because it took me a while to realize, but psychology means people and people means service. So I think when you look at my journey, everything aligns, but I would have not thought of that when I was, starting my career or my study, but I always been from even a child attracted to business and service. And, I hold different jobs, while I went to my studies, from a gas station to restaurants, but it always been in a milieu, if you want to say, within where I would service people in different facets. And I guess that led me to, where I'm at today. So even before Xylem, always been in an industrial mindset. My father used to say, I used to blame him for that because I said, I'm not in Gucci or shoes or kind of, even though I endure, I'm always seem to be attracted by industrial. Where there's an operation, where there's a purpose, when we fabricate something and service it. From tire industry to pulp and paper and mining and so I think the whole combination of that is what makes Bridgett today, and that's why we're here, I guess.
It's actually interesting. You said two different things, maybe three different things. You said you studied psychology, which is about people. I can't tell you how many of my guests have referred to their early experiences being around people as really a hallmark, one of the maybe almost foundational experiences of the career. So that's point number one. Point number two, I actually noticed, I thought you primarily spent time in sales and service, Bridgett, but I also noticed you were an operations manager in a factory sometime, right, in the past. That's all about people, right? I mean, people are different, as we say, shapes, sizes, and stripes are all different things. How has that, how does it translate to service? I mean, you said that by service. You get that, but How does that translate to service? And is that what really kind of gets you excited about service and the role you're playing today?
I think so because, service for me, even in my personal life, is something I pay attention to. And I think service is the core of everything we do, right? Personally or professionally. And, even like, when we fabricate products for companies, we fabricate product based on the service and the knowledge we get from the service and the needs we get from service and from the customer. So everything circles around it. A company is developed or created based on a service need,
Right.
right? So I think that's what attracted to me. And I think service, what I like about it is like it encompassed the whole customer journey, right? From the time they purchase to the time, the invoice, and we keep repeating that
Yeah.
cycle.
Yeah.
And throughout those cycles, there's different functions and process, and I think being in service touches all the aspects of the company. So if you're a curious person like me and like to have your hands in different things and understand the whole cycle of things, then I think that's why I'm into service, right? Doing one thing for me would have been maybe to my point would have been less attractive, right?
Right. It's actually a couple of things you said that I'll pick up in a second, but especially you talked about everybody in the company gets involved in service. One of the things we've been talking about it is the fact that I call aftermarket and service is actually one of the few quote unquote team games within a company.
Yeah.
Everybody has a finger in it. It's the manufacturing people need to know what's happening in the field, the finance people, the marketing people, sales people, support, you name it. Everybody, engineers have to know what's going on. So it really is a team game to do it right. And I think that's where the people aspect that you talked about really comes into this thing, right? So, one thing, if I go back to your career and when you look at the progression, I met you when you were the aftermarket sales director, right? Now
Yeah.
you're in this global automation leader job, automation and business process automation job. What led you into the first aftermarket sales job when you were running North American? I think you were running North American aftermarket sales at one time when we met. What led you into that job? And then what made Xylem say, hey, Bridgett, why don't you go do this global role now? I'd love to understand that.
Well, I think it was just a natural next step, right? I think, like I mentioned, throughout my career, I was very flexible in the role I hold. Always, eager to get into something new and try something new. And I think the aftermarket was something, new, not new in my career, but new for me to do.
Right.
And I think it was natural because to your point that you mentioned, right, being in operations and sales and then customer service, I think that vision and that skill set or experience altogether kind of creates aftermarket,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think it was just a natural progression from experience and background, but also, wanting to be involved in the customer journey, I guess.
There's something that you said along the way as well, in addition to the involvement in the customer journey, being able to deal with so many different people. One of the points you made a few minutes ago was that aftermarket is the one place within the business that you have repeated touches with the customer. It's not just a one time you send the filtration plant, you set it up or get the big project and PO done, but you have to continuously be in touch with the customer, your continuous interaction with the customer. How does that translate itself into how Xylem goes about building out the customer experience profile? How you personally have kind of played that into your own role as Bridgett, right? If you may, because that's a big thing that people forget. That service people are the ones who are in touch with the customer more often than anybody else in the company,
Yeah.
right?
I always make a reference to the car dealership. We all own a car at some point, or most people, have owned a vehicle in their lifetime. And I always say it's like, you get the vehicle, you purchase it, you get a great experience, the person who supports you in that purchase, will give you all your options. And sometimes it's a quality product, right? So, And then for like 4 years, you become friends with your service,
Right.
right? You go there every year, you
Yeah.
do maintenance, you preventive maintenance, they give you guidance, something's wrong. So I think it's the same. I think to your point, it's a recurring relationship. And that relationship is nourished through the process, how we approach it, how we support our customer, and how we understand them. So knowing really well your customer is critical, because that will drive your next product or your next
Mhm.
sales or your innovation projects. It's accumulation of all that data into one, right? And that's what drives you to take strategic decisions or put in place new processes. Because at the end of the day, like I said, that same customer is the customer of the whole company, from the product
Absolutely.
development, from manufacturing, invoicing, all of that is the same customer. So I think, that whole journey of repetitive relationship and building relationship with that customer. And when I say relationship, doesn't mean hey, hi, bye. It means relationship on the process, how we
That's
approach
right.
them, how we service them, right, and what we offer them, right.
It's actually interesting because I've been in and around services for, I don't know, 20 years now, right? Maybe 25 years. And I always thought that it is such a poorly utilized weapon in customer experience and growth and everything, right? It's not just, selling services and parts to make revenue and margin, but that relationship you said is not necessarily, hi, Bob, how are you? But it's the ability to deliver a superior experience for long periods of time is what creates massive loyalty and stickiness and, future growth. And I think people don't quite take it as seriously as they could. I think sometimes is what I've seen. So I'm glad to hear that as
Yeah.
Xylem and certainly you are thinking about it that way.
I think it's a relationship at the end of the day. And that's where my psychology comes in,
Yeah,
Vivek, right?
yeah,
It's a relationship, right? And you mentioned something and made me think about loyalty, right? Loyalty in a relationship. Well, to be able to have a loyal and long standing relationship, you need to communicate and understand parties that are
yeah,
involved in that relationship. So I think that's where psychology comes in, because a customer, I have a relationship with that customer, and how I maintain it and how I communicate and how I understand the needs of that relationship and will drive loyalty and long-term relationship professionally,
yeah,
right? At the same
absolutely,
same 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 concept, right?
absolutely, absolutely. There's before I switch to your job that you're doing today. One of the big things that happened in the last 18 months was Xylem merged with this company called Evoqua. And now combined, you guys have a very large service business, right? Not just North American, but global service business. Can you maybe just tell us a little bit about how, obviously it's public information, right? What the Xylem services mindset has changed, or has it changing, or how is that going to change going forward?
I think Xylem's service has always been existing through our 100 years of being Xylem and acquisition and becoming Xylem. So I think service has always been in the heart of what we do. I think I think it's just going to drive the focus even more, right? In making sure that we're aligned with our customers' needs,
Yep.
basically. Yeah,
Yep. Good. It's a big powerhouse now.
yeah.
So switching back a little bit to your current job and as it relates to the whole aftermarket and service thing, right? So there's a set of experiences you've gained not just in the last few years in the aftermarket and services business, but from manufacturing onwards. How does that play a role in your current global job? And I think this is your first real global job, right? So far, you were primarily the North American sector, right? Now this is your first global job. How does that aftermarket and services play in your new role, and especially as you think about the whole
Yeah.
Xylem Global as a stage?
So basically, yeah, to your point, I've been involved in global project, but never, leading a role, officially. But I think it helps in the way that service is service, no matter where we are in the world. And I think it's all about, innovation and keeping in keeping connected, right? I think companies that will drive service, it's a company that's adaptable, but also, is able to drive change,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And I think the learning, I think it doesn't matter where you are, I think in the world. I think at the end of the day, and no matter the industry, to be honest, I think the concept of service is what we should be focusing on,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And the concept of aftermarket. And the focus might be different in different companies or the priorities. But I think the concept of service and aftermarket, no matter what type of industry you're in, it exists.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
if we put a focus on that as a company, every, like I keep repeating, but every function in the company
Will
will
get affected.
gain from that,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
I feel like I said before, the service and aftermarket and is part of the heart of the company, because I feel like it's where it all comes in, right? And that repeated, it's like a
Yeah.
repeated inflow,
Yeah.
right? And how you drive that concept throughout the company is what will make it successful.
So then this role, that's a global role. It's about business applications, business process, right? That's fundamentally what it is. So I've always thought that to do any sort of transformation or change that you just talked about is people, process, and technology,
Yep.
right? So is that kind of how you think about a role in terms of people, process, and technology, primarily around aftermarket and services globally? Is
Yeah.
that the mandate?
Because I think one of the things, we all have a phone, right? Right? We all have technology in our life
Yeah.
in this new modern world. I think a tool is not sufficient. And
Yeah.
sometimes we probably come with the assumption that a tool will solve for it.
Yeah.
A tool is an enabler to what you're trying
Completely.
to achieve, right?
Completely.
And then you have a process that is supported by that tool, right? And at the end of the day, it's all about people again. So there's people within the company, your customer are people.
Yeah.
And how do you harmonize all these three things will drive, and that's kind of what my focus is, right?
Yeah.
Is how, what are we trying to solve for, right? And what are the process that we're trying to solve for? How could that be supported with a tool? And how do we drive that, process and tool together to drive
Mhm.
change and benefit from those change, right? And achieve, right, what we're trying to get to, in this case, service, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So when you think of this role, and you said something a few minutes ago, which is important, which is service is service. Everybody has to kind of make sure that you take care of the customer. I think the last time I checked, I think there was like, I don't know how many countries in the emerging markets in Europe, but there's a lot of countries across the Xylem network. What have you, in the last, I guess, 6 to 9 months since you've been in this role, what has your experience been in terms of the similarities in terms of how people do and execute and think about service versus the differences? Because there have to be some local nuances maybe that people, certainly sitting in the US, we don't think about it. What have you learned? Because I know you've been on the road a lot, visiting all the different
Yeah,
areas of the.
I think what I enjoy mostly about the global role, to your point, is from a business standpoint, is coming to a realization that probably 80% of what we do is the same, is similar, right? But what's different is the people and how we approach it, and our customers, and sometimes cultures and different ways of doing business in different countries. But I do think 80% of what we do is similar, right? And
Fascinating.
then I think the beauty of the 20%, it's is learning about each other and the different innovative ideas, and then be able to scale those ideas in from one country to another,
Hmm.
right? So I don't see the differences or the similarities as a negative, but hey, leverage that to drive even more, right? So when you look about it, when you think about it, 80% of what we do, because we're the same in the world, but we're located in different place. Yes, there might be particularities of service because there's a specific need geographically.
Right.
If you think of, in a mining industry versus a more, city like. Of course, there's different practices, but I think that's how I see it. Like
Yeah.
it's leveraging that 20% difference in taking the best ideas from that and scaling it, right?
Now, when you think of this global service role, I know as part of the merger with Xylem and Evoqua, you guys created a global services head, right? So now you have a global services leader who sits in the executive committee almost, if you may, reporting to the CEO. That is a new framework, I think, for Xylem. All right, there was not such a strong senior role at the management board, executive level. Is that part of the change that you guys are doing, which is knitting together all the different organizations across the world? Not just the Evoco Xylem harmonization, but across the entire network, kind of making it one single view to the customer. Is that how you guys are thinking about it as part of this change?
Well, we always been, since we've been named Xylem, becoming one Xylem with different products and brands and different solutions. So our journey is obviously to be one Xylem for our customers and being able to support them with whatever needs they have in different parts of the world and different areas of the business. So driving, being one Xylem and being able to support the customer in time, I think that's
Always been
our
the case.
key. Yeah,
Got it.
customer. Yeah,
Now, when you think about your progression all the way from the manufacturing job to the sales jobs and our global aftermarket business process leader, if you may, there are probably a bunch of lessons you learned along the way, right? I mean, but clearly one was people and relationships we talked
yeah,
about. One was, I think I hear about the sameness, which is actually interesting. I've always told people like, look, the more companies think they're different, they're more actually the same, right? And then in some ways,
yep.
it reflects it within a company as well. Are there other things that you have learned that are important lessons for people who might be listening to this show, which is really maybe somebody who wants to be in your shoes someday, somebody who wants to become a global aftermarket leader or even a North American aftermarket sales leader like you were before this, right? What are the lessons that you can kind of share with them that might help people think about it as they think about their career progression?
I think it's don't be scared to try. Like try things, try things, try different things, be flexible. Because I feel like your career is like a construction site, right? You start with an idea, then it doesn't really fit with what it was supposed to be. Then you change the format. Then you learn from that, and you keep striving. So I think from a career standpoint, I would say don't be scared to try. Not everybody who's in their role knows their job or when they
Interesting.
started it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And have confidence in yourself, right? In what baggage you bring, because that's what makes you, as an individual. I think to be in service, you got to love what you do. And I think being close to people, but consistency in innovating and creating, I think is where service is. I say service is probably anywhere in the business world, but
Yeah.
I think in the service area, people expect what they get from their personal. And as you know, with the technology today and everything, and the data-driven information, and being able from a push of a button to get what I need or reach somebody. But at the end of the day, also there's always people, and I think we felt it during the COVID season, right? And the episode. That technology was very needed, but
Right.
it's also still at the end of the day, we're servicing an individual, right? And yeah, so I would say, keep, innovating and driving, right? I think.
I'm going to ask you a slightly different question, but similar to that theme in the sense that, this question is about what your experiences have been in terms of, comment that other people can take. I look at the reason I call this an Aftermarket Champions podcast is for two reasons. One is champions like you as in people who are really making sure services grows and becomes a bigger deal for everybody and get the best people in the business, right? It's a huge part of it. But the other part of the Aftermarket Champions is also the fact that some companies are better than the others at making service happen. And clearly Xylem both the legacy Xylem and the new Xylem with Evoco has always been a service leader. You've been in your career, you've been at other places as well, and you probably talked to other people as well. What what's in your experience or what in your assessment is what sets what I would say champions apart from the others? I mean, what are the characteristics of these companies that makes them so unique to become to what I call to become what I call champions?
I think it's a mindset. I think it's a mindset. You need to see service in every aspect of what you do, right? I think it's a mindset of, hey, if I do this, what impact will it have on the next stage? I look at the customer's journey, right? And if we do this here, how is that going to impact over here?
Hmm.
And and I think another thing is being collaborative. You can't do it alone. It
Hmm.
needs collaboration between the different functions in the
Yeah.
business. And I mean not about servicing the customer, but I mean about making sure that each one's effort hands off to the other one, and that the customer's journey is smooth throughout it. But I think really what sets a champion is I think it's truly a mindset and being able to drive, that creativity behind,
Right.
finding ways, right? When I say good customer service or good aftermarket or good service, sometimes doesn't mean we always say yes or we
Right.
always have the answer, right? But it's important to capture the need and making sure we solve for it, right? In some way. So I think having that mindset sets
Is a big
somebody
deal.
off, right? Seeing the whole life cycle of the customer journey.
Yeah, I think there's both the things you said are really important. I think the mindset is important and it manifests itself in the way the company constructs the services business and the team and so on and so forth. And the other part you said, which actually a lot of people forget, is this collaborative across multiple functions and not just functions, but even your channel partners, maybe, right? And I've always said this to people. I was like, look, aftermarket and service is a team game. People forget that. You have to have so many different people involved in it, right? And making all that work with the right mindset is important. So I think that's been really something that's actually good to hear from you in terms of how people and certainly what you think is a difference.
Yeah. Because
Now, sorry, go ahead.
No, because I think when you think about it, right, the technician in the field, the person on the phone, the salesperson or the account, everybody brings value to that
Yeah.
customer. And it's a collaboration of all that, right, that drives that relationship or that
And I
app.
think that's a kind of a understated secret again that people don't take advantage of in terms of doing it. Bridget, one thing that I look at also when I think about Xylem, your role, and as a role model for other people who are looking to become like a senior global business leader, we talked about people and relationships. We talked about mindset. We talked about collaboration, right, across multiple functions. We talked about, I think you said something interesting a few minutes ago, which is your jobs are like a construction site, which is nothing is ever complete because you almost always come in with a blank slate. Almost nobody's done that job they're in for the first time, right?
Yeah.
So it's always this learning mindset. Those are actually quite important lessons, I think, for people to take away. I was talking to one of our other guests the other day, and he said something that you also said at the beginning of the conversation, which is this ability to continuously and repeatedly stay in touch with your customer is also a part of it, right? How do you get people to kind of do that, right? How do you make sure people understand that this repeated touch, continuous touch is something that should be championed and cherished? Because I don't see that happen all the time. But because that's that last piece that I think you mentioned also to me. That's
Yeah.
important.
I think there's different ways to go about it depending on the company's approach. I think it could be simple by, getting everybody in one room on a monthly basis and share their experience within their, as basic as that, right?
Yeah.
And getting everybody in the room sharing, their experience throughout the month and their reality with customers. There's obviously surveys and transactional NPS score, surveys. There's also general case stories that we go, but there's also platforms or tools that, helps us, to identify patterns and look, we always think about a company sometimes through numbers, right? And it's normal at the end of the day, but it's a combination of those different
Yeah.
information. I
Yeah.
think that keeps us and tells us where
Connected.
to go and when to get in touch with the customer,
Yeah.
right?
I think that's important. I think that's keeping people reminded of all this stuff is important.
Yeah.
Bridgett, I always like to end these interviews with my favorite question. And, I'm a big fan of podcasts, and there's one particular podcast I listen to hosted by a gentleman called Guy Raz. And he always asks this question, right? As you look at your career, look at where you are today, how much of it do you say is luck? And how much of it say this because you're amazingly good? Right? I always like to ask that question to people because it's a fascinating question.
Well, I think it's a little bit of both. I think being flexible and open and trying different things and curious, I think brought me to this place. Being uncomfortable, um, and I think being in the right place at the right time also probably. I've been cherished throughout my career. I had good mentor, good leaders that believed in me and allowed me to grow. So, I think it's a little bit of both. But if I can give, I guess always had an innovative mindset, and not be scared. I think that drove me to where I am,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And having a little bit of that, perseverance character, I guess that would be one of the skill set. But I
Yeah.
think it's a little bit of both. Some is luck, being in the right place at the right time, having the right people see at this time. But if I could give advice on the final note, don't assume people see what you do, right? Make sure that you
That's
you
right.
you show it in a humble way,
That's
in a
right.
respectful way, but don't be scared to come forward with ideas, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Now that's such an important advice. You can't be a poorly kept secret all the time. It doesn't help anybody, right?
Exact,
So
exact.
no, that's great. I think I love that answer, and I think that's exactly how I think about how people have said this to me. The same thing, which is, luck kind of gets you to some places and open doors for you, but what you do with it is all within your control, and how you take advantage of the opportunities to get to
Yeah.
where you're at.
Like they say,
So
you create your luck, right? In some sense,
in
right?
some sense. So anyway, so this is good. Well, Bridget, this has been a great conversation. I think the kind of points you discussed are, or you mentioned, are exactly how I think about it. It's people and relationships, it's continuity, it's the curiosity, it's a learning mindset, right? All those things that matter eventually, that comes down to all these things is what people get it. And I think making the mindset of service is so important in the business, because then you start making the company change happen once you start putting these things. So this has been a really, really good conversation. I
Yeah.
really appreciate your time today, Bridget. Thank you so much for that. I think our listeners are going to have a really good time listening to it and learning much from what our conversation is about.
Thank you for having
Have a
me.
great day. Yes.
Yeah, I think it was great. Thank you, Vivek.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.